Okay. Are you going to the room?
Yes, I'll go to the room.
Thank you. I'll tell you when I'm done. It'll be a while though, because I think this is going to be a long video. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Like I have said in my last video, I'm still fighting something off. And so if my voice sounds a little crazy, that's why. I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to start talking about, since the new year's coming up, and when I told you in my last video that I want to start incorporating more things into my channel, this is kind of the head of where the direction of the path that I started living. And so I wanted to continue my plants, pain, and trauma, and just tell you my whole life story of the things and the episodes and the stories that happened to me after my transplant and what got me on the road to taking better care of myself, my family, taking care of our digestive system, our wellness, and everything kind of snowballed into one about a year, 2 years, because I had David, my son, a year after my transplant. And then after he was about 8 months old was when I got into the world of essential oils. And it was not the first time I had used them. I had used them a couple years before that, here and there, when I made my own body creams, my own facial lotions, my own toners, and all of that. We will go on, that's gonna go into a little box up on the shelf. What I'm going to be talking about today is what led me into getting a transplant, an organ transplant. I have a pancreas and a kidney that does not belong to me inside of my body. Trying to continue where I left off in my last plants, pain, and trauma story, testimony, background. If you have not watched that yet, if you're newer to my channel, you have not seen those, I highly suggest you go and watch those and go through them. They are long videos, just like this one will be. I may split this up into 2 videos because this is going to take a while. So if you watch those and then you come back to this one and watch that, everything will make sense. To just catch everyone up in a very small nutshell, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent, when I was 2 years old. I did not take care of myself. I had anger problems. I was an alcoholic. I lost my eyesight. I had neuropathy, a very horrible, painful nerve damage in my legs. And I was in abusive relationships. And I met Jeff. I left Jeff for a year. We got back together. Our marriage got what I thought was healed. There were still secrets. And I left you guys off after I got back together with Jeff, after we had been separated for a year of our marriage, and I had just been abused by a boyfriend that I had lived with previously. That's why you need to go watch those videos, because that'll explain a lot more into detail. So about a year after me and Jeff were back together, I was going and visiting the kidney doctor, and at this point my kidneys started to decline in function. And if I look to the side, and if I'm totally squirreling it right now, if I look down a lot, or I'm trying to bring up the memories and what I can remember, and if I go back and forth on some of the things, these are just little bits and parts. This was over 10 years ago, and this is things that I'm trying to remember what all led up to it. So we got back together almost exactly a year later, I began to get very tired, and some stuff started happening. I started getting these bumps on my skin that looked like cystic acne. I am a picker, and so when I know this is going to be gross for some of you, and it's going to go into a lot of detail and medical stuff, gross stuff, not anything gross as in like perverted or anything like that, but I'm an open book. I'm very transparent. I say it all. So I started getting these, like this breakout or these big bumps that, if you've ever seen cystic acne, it is underneath the skin, and that acne never comes to a head, and the more you play with it, the bigger these welts get, and they're painful. I started getting this all over my face, my neck, sometimes on my upper chest area, seldomly on my body, but I would pick them, and I'd pick them to the point where they would start to leak. And I went to my kidney doctor, and he had told me that this was a way where toxins were trying to escape my body, because if you do not know, our skin is the largest organ on our body, and our skin is also a filtering system, and whatever is going on in the body, it usually will show through the skin, because it's trying to get rid of toxins, or if something's off in the body hormonally, just digestive issues, it shows through the skin. I know a lot about this kind of stuff, even though I'm not certified in any kind of health or wellness classes. I have done a lot of research. I didn't know this at this time. I was clueless because I hadn't done any research. And before this time, so this is my second kidney doctor, because me and my husband wanted to get a second opinion. My first kidney doctor basically told me and Jeff that your wife needs to be on dialysis. We will give her about 7 years to live on dialysis, but after that, usually people don't live very long when they rely on a machine to clean your blood, to filter out toxins, because your kidneys cannot do that. So you go in, my mom was on it as well when she was alive, and you go in, you get plugged up to a machine, and it basically takes your blood out and it filters it through a machine, and then it goes back into your body. And then that's one way you can do dialysis. And then the second way you can do dialysis is, I'm probably going to be saying this wrong, is peritoneal or periodontal, where there is a tube, a pretty long tube that they put into the empty cavity of your abdominal area, and you get hooked up to a machine. You have this huge solution in this bag that goes into the body, it has all the toxins that your kidneys can't filter out, and it absorbs it, and then this liquid is drained out of your body. Those are the two ways that you can do dialysis. So this first doctor told me and my husband probably about 7 years to live, no kids, because I was so sick. My body was so sick and so tired. I couldn't have kids, yada, yada, yada. We wanted a second opinion. So we went to another kidney doctor. He was seeing me for probably a couple of years, maybe a year. And my kidneys kept declining. So a normal person, 100% kidneys functioning, and mine dropped to 70% or 80%. Then it kept dropping to 70%. And I think the lowest that my kidneys got, I can't remember. My kidneys were probably filtering all the toxins out of my system. I want to keep saying 12%. Very low. I was swollen all the time. I did not feel good. I had these wounds that would not heal because it was a way for my toxins to get out of my body. So I had these huge welts or scab-like things that were just staying there and they wouldn't go away. And I know this is gross, but it had a funny smell to it. Like this clear liquid that would come out of my pores or out of these wounds would have a really funny smell to it. And I don't know, it was just toxins and my body was sick. And it got to the point where my red blood cells had no energy to them. So I would have to go in, I think once or twice a week. My husband will come on after I'm done talking, and he's going to give his, he told me he would do that for me, where he was going to give what he saw, what he felt, and how he took all the information in as well. Because not only do you go through it, your loved ones also go through stuff too. And so if I get emotional, it's because I have a lot of vulnerability here. And so I'd go in once or twice a week and I'd get these shots, and it was called Epogen. And I'm trying to hold it together, guys, because I don't talk about this all the time. And this is why I'm in therapy, because I'm working through medical trauma, because your body goes into kind of this survival mode. And this is part of the reason why I have PTSD. And I'm like, you have to survive, you have to survive, you have to survive. So my crazy brain, I shouldn't say my crazy brain, I should just say my brain has a lot of information and stuff that I deal with. So we'd go in once a week or twice a week, and we'd get these shots called Epogen. And it basically, okay, so when Olympic people or people in professional sports will get these shots, but they will get in trouble for it, because what this does is to a normal person, these shots, these Epogen shots, I think that's what it's called, Epogen. There's another word for it, because one shot will increase white blood cell count, and then there's another shot that increases red blood cell count, and I think it was called Epogen or Nupogen or Epogen. Whatever one, because I got both. One before the transplant, one after the transplant. So I'd get these shots, and what would happen is people in the athletic industry or the sports industry would get shots on a normal blood cell count or normal red blood cell oxygen to boost their performance, to run better, to have more oxygen to the blood, so they performed better. It was basically a performance enhancer. But to someone who was sick like me, would go in just to be able to live, function. I was iron deficient. I would just fall asleep all the time. My body was very sick, and it was dying. And I leaked protein like crazy out of my kidneys. I basically peed my fat out because there was so much protein and sugar leaking into the kidneys that I was peeing my fat out, and my urine was frothy because I was peeing this stuff out. And I couldn't keep weight on. People used to think I was anorexic, but I would eat like a horse. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything that I've talked about before in the other trauma videos. And so get these shots, and then after a while, we finally came to the decision, and I loved my kidney doctor. He was like, I think it's time that we put you on the transplant, a transplant, kidney and pancreas, because I had what you called brittle diabetes. At this point, I was on an insulin pump. My kidneys were shutting down. I think it's called like renal failure. I was partially blind, or I am partially blind, and I was like, okay. But then he was trying to offset putting me on dialysis, but when I was getting these shots and my kidneys were starting to even drop lower, he then said, we need to also get you in. It was before he had said the transplant list. He was getting the transplant stuff, or the list, and all the steps I needed to do before I got on the list settled and done. And he said, it can't wait anymore. My kidneys were barely functioning, and I had decided I did not want the fistula or fistula in my arm. My mom had this type. It's where they connect a vein in your arm, right here, your forearm, and they take your artery inside of your arm and they connect them together so that your vein basically bloats up like it's on steroids, so that they can put a needle in your arm and then do dialysis in your arm that way. And I did not want to do that because you have to go into a medical building 6 hours out of like 3 times a week, 4 times a week. I think my mom was going 4 times a week for like 3 or 4 hours. And I wanted to be at home. And so I wanted the one where they put it inside. It was like, you know, where your belly button is, it was like right to the left of my belly button. And that's where they put this rubber silicone tube. I don't know what it is. And probably about a week or 2 later, I went in for surgery. They put in this tube in my gut, and from that point was going into the dialysis center, and they taught my husband and I how to change out, do the solutions every night. I was hooked up to a machine for 9 hours a night, and I would do it at nighttime, and then I would unhook myself in the morning, shut it, and there's all kinds of things that were involved with it. There was a big truck that would come to our apartment and drop off boxes of this solution that was this dialysis. And then I think it was once a week, my husband had to put heparin in. Heparin is something that like cleaned out, made it so that my body, because it's a foreign object in your body, and so your body will go and try to fight it, push it out, create this webbing like stuff inside of this tube because it's trying to somehow heal it or get rid of it, or it was just not what your body wants inside of it. And so you'd have to do these heparin shots, and it would basically clean. It was like this rotor-rooter for this tube that was inside of my body. And then when we would bring it back out, or when we would hook me up to a machine to drain out all of that stuff out of my gut, there was this weird white webbing stuff that would come out of this tube. And this all happened in a very close proximity. So I was on periodontal dialysis. I got trained for 2 months. I started doing dialysis from home for 3 months. And in this time, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of questioning. There was a lot of why questions, and there was a lot of bitterness with God. And I remember when Jeff would hook me up, I remember I was sitting on our bed, and the window was in front of me, my IV pole that held the solution of the stuff that was going to go into my gut. I looked like I was like 7 months pregnant when it would go in. I'd never been pregnant, remember, at this point. Side note. So my belly stretching down there wasn't comfortable at all. And sometimes this tube, when it was sucking the solution out, would suction onto skin or organs inside of my body. And I would wake up with this horrible like pinching pain inside of my abdominal area. And I'd have to have my husband stop the machine. And it was not something I would wish upon my worst enemies. I remember him hooking me up, and I was like, I don't understand. I would say, I don't know why God would have kept me alive when I was 2, if this is what he knew what was going to happen to me. And I've struggled with that for a long time. I think it's funny when people say that they don't believe in God, and because I do. I think it's funny when people don't believe in God. I'm not making fun of anyone, but then when they're hurting, or if they're in pain or in trouble or any kind of turmoil or depression, and then they're like, they want to blame someone, so they blame God, but yet they say they don't believe in him. I don't know, that's just something I think about a lot. So I started getting upset, and I was angry, and I was hurt, and 3 months later, not 3 months later, so we were told at the very beginning of, after our training for doing dialysis from home, that I was put on the transplant list. I believe that was in December, maybe October, because I was on the transplant list for 7 months. So that would be what? So at the end of November, beginning of December. And that is very, very short for okay. Rewind. I got put on the transplant list at the end of November, December. I got trained with my dialysis in February. I had my surgery. And then I was on dialysis from February, March, April, May. So I was at home doing dialysis for 3 months from February, and then had my surgery. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm trying to remember it all. Okay. So I was trained for a month. Anyways, in that, from February to about May, I know somehow I was on dialysis at home doing it ourselves for 3 months. And I got put on the transplant list a couple months before that. And it is a very short amount of time that I had to wait, even though it felt like an eternity because of what situation I was in. So in this time, I had to have my cell phone on me all the time, because you could get called at any hour, any minute, any day to say, come in, we have organs for you. And so I got my first phone call. I was so excited. It was nighttime. They told me, I got my transplant at Virginia Mason in Seattle. And I just remember telling my kidney doctor, if I was your daughter, what hospital would you place me in to get an organ transplant? And he said Virginia Mason. And so that's where I went. That's where I received it. Loved all my doctors. My transplant, the guy who did my transplant, the head doctor, his name was Dr. Hefty. And I remember I would always say, Hefty, 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 whenever he would come into whenever I would see him. And I began getting phone calls, went in, they told me to get my blood drawn. They took between 10 and 17 vials of blood. My arm was shaking and it was cold, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember I've always kind of looked at pain. I've kind of disassociated from pain. So whenever I'd get my blood work done, it was no big deal to me. And I remember getting my blood work, there was a needle in my arm, and I was in the section where firefighters and ambulances would come in and bring in people who were in the emergency room. And one of the firefighters goes, man, it's not every day where you see some girl laughing with a needle in her arm. And I don't know, it was just second nature to me because I had been stuck with needles since I was 2 years old. And went and got that blood work done, and come to find out I wasn't the one picked for the transplant, and that was kind of a letdown. And you've got to realize I was 25. I just turned 25 at this time. And 25, maybe 24. I don't know. I was 24, 25. And I was young. I had some things that were pluses about being on the transplant list. I was young and I was in list for a double transplant, so for 2 organs. And so that pushed me up to the top of the list a little bit farther than some people. And the first time I got called, it was a letdown. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm to expect every time I get a phone call. And I got another phone call and they said it wasn't me. And then I got another phone call and it wasn't me. And then I think I got 2 or 3 more after that, I believe. And finally I got so frustrated. I was like, I told God, I was like, I don't want to be called until I'm the next person. I'm tired of the emotional, my nose is acting up. I'm tired of the emotional roller coaster. This is not fair. I don't like this. Don't allow me to be called until it's me. I was very real with God. I'm not preaching at anybody. This is my story. Remember that? This is my why. I do what I do today, why I'm into plants, why I'm into health, why I'm into essential oils, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's why I named myself on my YouTube username, channel name, Illum Life. I know this is kind of off subject because it stands for, Illum is short for illuminating life. I want to do that for people. That's why I picked what I picked. There's a lot of meaning behind names that I choose or that I like. And so that was at the end of March, at the end or mid-April. And I didn't get another phone call. And time went on. And we got to May 23rd. Was it May 23rd or 24th? It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Wait, not 2 o'clock. That was when I went in for the transplant. I don't even know what time it was when they called me. It was about, yeah, it had to have been about 2 o'clock. Maybe. I don't know. Okay, so I got the phone call. Excuse me. I got the phone call and the gal said, hey, just want to tell you that there is organs available and we want to tell you that you are second. This is the closest I had ever been to the top. They said you are second in line. So if that person had said no, or if you're sick, or if you have any kind of open cut, or you have any kind of chest issues, cold, anything, you cannot get your transplant. You have to basically be in perfect condition, not perfect, but healthier condition to be able to go under the knife to get a transplant. I also want a side note. I know I'm all over the place right now because I'm remembering different things now. From the time I knew I was going to be on the transplant list and the day leading up to it, that night, that second, driving in, I was praying the whole time. I don't care what you believe in. Believe what you believe in. But this is me. This is my story. This is what happened to me. I know who it was, and we're moving on from there. So I'd pray to God and I'd just say, there is no soul alive that is going to give you a pancreas. You have one. It is a huge, major organ in your system that controls hormones, insulin levels, islet cells, all kinds of things inside of your pancreas. Age 2, mine was fried. That's why I became diabetic. No living being is going to do that. So I had to ask to wait for a cadaver, for someone who has died, to receive one of their kidneys and their pancreas from the same person, because usually rejection is less if you get the organs from the same person, from the same cadaver. And so I would pray, and how do you pray? I don't want to pray that someone dies. I don't want to pray that someone has their life taken, or, you can't pray for something like that. So I would ask God, I'd be like, your timing, God, not mine. Your timing, however it's going to happen. But let it be that you are the doctor's hands, the nurse's hands. You lead everything, Lord. And so I remember getting that phone call, and they said, don't eat anything, don't drink anything. I think they said I could have water, sleep tonight. You're probably not going to get a phone call till tomorrow morning. And how can you not sleep when you're told you're the second one on the list? Just saying. So, stayed up all night. I maybe tried to go to bed for like an hour or two. I was super excited. I remember the morning came, my husband went to work. He said, just call me if they call me, obviously. And I remember it was like 12 o'clock the next day in the afternoon, rolled around. I was like, this is bull. I'm eating something because I'm hungry. And I started getting carrots and ranch out, and the phone rang, and I answered it, and her name was Wanda. I remember this nurse's name. She was a nurse practitioner. And she said, hey, Emily, and we are so sorry, but I have to tell you a little bit of bad news, that there were the kidney-only people on the transplant list, and then there was a pancreas-only transplant people, and then there was the double organ transplant people, and I was on that one. But she was like, I'm sorry to tell you, but we forgot to put the pancreas-only people on the list, and so you are down to number 4 on the list. And my heart just sank, you guys, and I was like, are you kidding me? Okay, well, there goes my shot. I was in the kitchen in our apartment. We lived in a small apartment, me and my husband. And I remember getting off the phone, and I started getting angry because I was hurt. And I remember I felt like, this is BS. That's what I said. I said the real word. And I said, God, I told you. Here I am throwing a fit to God. But I believe that God can take realness over fake. And that's what I was. And I said, I told you I didn't want to be called. I told you, don't let anyone call me if it wasn't going to be me. And I remember saying the words, Lord, I don't know how this is going to have to be a miracle. This is going to have to be a damn miracle. Please let them all deny it. All of them. I don't know, guys. He heard me. And I may lose some subscribers because I'm talking about God. And that's okay, because I'm not doing this for the count. I'm doing this to touch someone or to give someone hope. And I got a phone call about 2 o'clock that afternoon. And this really sweet nurse, I knew who she was. I know who this nurse was. And she goes, "Hi, Emily." And I remember saying, "Hi." And she goes, "I just wanted to tell you that we did a blood test with the donor and you, and your blood just about matches this donor's blood. And there's a scale, I know this may not make sense to some of you, but there's a scale from like 1 to 6. And your blood somehow has to match different areas to be able to coincide. Your blood needs to coincide with this donor, because anything that's foreign inside of your body, it will reject it, because your body will see it as foreign and it will basically get rid of it. And she says, your blood, and I've had many blood transfusions, especially when I was 2 and I was in the hospital and I almost died. And then also when I was 22, I had another blood transfusion. And so it's harder because the body starts to build up antibodies against other blood cells, and it starts to more of a defense mechanism, like more on guard. So my blood already had this in it. And so when she says, well, your blood basically like practically matches this person's, the donor's blood, and it's a match of 4 out of a 6, and usually people are around 2 and 3 out of a 6. So I was a 4 out of a 6. That was a good thing. And I said, that's great and all, but I'm number 4 on the list. And I remember I was like sitting in my room, standing, and I was looking out the window, and I said that. And she goes, that's the thing. She goes, you're number 1. You're number 1 on the list. And I think I was in shock. I go, what? And she goes, you're number 1. They all denied it. Now you tell me that's not someone who's listening. I was screaming, and I just go, I don't know what you believe in, but this is Jesus Christ. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that God heard me. I was blown away. I was excited. I didn't know what to say. And she goes, how quick can you get here? And I said, my husband will take about 45 minutes to get home, and then we'll be there in maybe 2 hours. Give us 2 hours. And so she's like, all right. And I have pictures that I'm going to show you of just little clips here and there of me after my transplant. And I remember calling Jeff, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, are you serious? He was shocked. And I said, yeah, we need to pack up, and we need to leave. We need to go to Seattle. And so we drove into Seattle, and I went in, I got a chest x-ray. I got tons of blood work taken before I went into the OR. And I wasn't scared. There was this peace, this calmness, this joy, this shock. And I remember I just knew I knew who did it for me. And I know it may seem like I'm preaching at you guys. That's not what I'm doing. And not every story turns out like mine. But I will tell you something. I've been to hell and back. My short 35 years of life, almost 35, I've walked the walk. I've seen people die. I've been through a lot. And that's not toot. I know what suffering feels like, emotionally, physically, mentally. And I think, since it's probably an hour video already, I'm gonna leave you there. I'll take a breather, and Christmas is this next week, and then I'll probably continue the next following week and show you the pictures of some of the pictures from my transplant and recovery, and then just kind of keep on this road of why I do what I do. Basically, this is going to be my channel, because I'm not going to just make it about plants anymore. Sorry about my nose. My nose is acting up. It's going to be about my life story and my life and why I choose to live and use the things that I use and that I do. And people used to call me crazy, and I'm a crunchy girl, and I'm a hippie, and I'm weird, but that's okay. It's okay to be weird. It's okay to be not the same. It's okay not to fit in people's molds. And so this is where my journey is going to be taking me. This is where I think I have found my niche, where I think I've built up enough trust with a lot of my viewers that I think it's going to be worth it to just hang in there and share what you want to share with me, and I will share what you have questions. But I thank you for taking the time to actually listen, watch, absorb, and to give me that chance to be able to talk to all of you. I promise, no preaching. I'm just giving what my experience has been. I will see you then. That's me signing out. Do you see what this cup says? The boss.